Hello RPG fans and welcome back to the kingdom. For the 17th challenge run, I'm taking it all the way back to a game that originally released on the PlayStation 2, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. This game holds a pretty special place in my heart. I remember way back then using a multi-tap and playing anywhere from 2 to 4 people going through this game. Such a blast. Must have beaten it probably a dozen times or so, and it was really cool that I was able to find it on Steam, but at a massive $30 price tag. Yeah, I was not a fan of that, but let's go ahead and get into it. Can you beat Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance with only fire damage? My initial thoughts was, well, is this really going to be different than just using magic only? And it actually is. So fire damage is the weakest early game. I've got Burning Hands, which is a channeled ability, and its damage is so bad. And the mana regen in this game is absolutely abysmal. It is atrocious. So probably half of my overall in-game time was just sitting at a save point, just waiting for my health and mana to regen before I can continue. So you might ask, well, that seems like a waste. What'd you do in all that downtime? Well, I'll tell you. I did bench presses, sit-ups, curls, and used my elliptical, as well as my under-the-desk treadmill. There was a lot of exercising while waiting for my mana to regen, so hey, I mean, this game, I guess, got me more healthy. There's not too many rules to go over because of the age of this game. It's really hard to just kind of add on limitation after limitation, but we will be on hard mode, fire damage only. We must beat the optional Onyx Golem at the end of the game, and no glitches, exploits, hacks, mods, free or paid DLC if there is any, and our victory condition is to beat the final storyline boss. In the beginning cinematic, it shows our character entering the gates of Baldur's Gate, and we get hit in the back of the head by some rugged thieves, and we get all of our gold taken. We then awaken, and the guards tell us to go to the tavern. Maybe we can find a way to get back at the thieves, and the taverness, if that's even a word, advises that there's a key that someone holds, but in order to gain access to the sewers and maybe try and find the thieves, we need to clear out the rats. So this is where we are. We are using Burning Hands to mow down some rats, and we are having rat barbecue. Throughout the game, there are some advantages to all of these boxes being everywhere. You can jump on some of them, which gives you time to regen your mana instead of just running around continuously. And also the smaller mobs won't be able to hit upwards. So this is a pretty good little trick. I don't really know if this is intentional, but just trying to make use of what's around me. There's a few levels to the sewers, and throughout this we will be fighting goblins and kobold type creatures who can throw javelins as well as melee. And then we will also be fighting some green and blue slimes. Now the slimes really hurt, and they can go through your guard. So one of the ways to deal with them is when you aggro them, just hide around a corner and they will slowly but surely start making their way towards you. And then once they're at about a 45-degree angle between you and the corner of the wall, you can use your Burning Hands on them and they won't actually be in line of sight to hit back yet. So this is kind of a cheese tactic, but it is a reliable way to deal with the slimes. Once we get far enough into the sewers, we will then find our entrance into the crypt, which is our next destination. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of undead everywhere. Now, most of them are relatively slow, so I can group quite a bit up and use the Burning Hands. However, with the Burning Hands, since it still is a channeled ability, it does cost a lot of MP, and it's not really sustainable. So Burning Hands right now doesn't do enough damage to really kill anything unless I have an entire mana bar. So in order for the entire mana bar to refill, I could either chug potions, which eats into the amount of gold that I have, and I really need the gold to buy better defense gear, or I can just run really far away to where nothing is aggroed on me and just passively regen, which I do a lot in Acts 1, 2, and 3. And there is a priest a little ways into the crypt as well that will heal our HP for free, but he does nothing with our mana bar, so it's not really worth anything. And I also be sure to talk to everyone inside the tavern and pick up their quests as well. It's not like there's any secrets in this game, so as long as you just explore every avenue, then you'll automatically pick up all the quest items needed and turn them in for some additional experience and money. But for the most part, the reason why I did it was for the experience. At the deepest end of the crypts, we start to face the Orb of the Undead, which is the item that was placed here by an evil dude that is raising up the dead to kill the priests in the town. Now, it's our job, of course, to prevent this from happening, and so we go ahead and use Burning Hands on all of the waves of enemies that the orb summons. However, the orb itself can only be damaged by physical attacks. It is immune to magic damage. The damage won't even register on the orb. So this is a mandatory attack, which is also why I've been upgrading my main hand whenever I get it, and I'll be doing that throughout the game, because as I was playing through this, I didn't know if there was going to be any other mechanics like that throughout the game. So the last thing I wanted was to have like a 5 to 7 damage weapon going into the final dungeon of the game, only to realize that, hey, I actually have to physical attack this thing, and then it would almost be impossible probably. I did game over a couple times on this fight, mainly due to being super surprised by damage. Sometimes when jumping and turning my back onto a mob, I get like super crit or something like that, but my HP bar just like, they 100 to 0 me. It's kind of insane. And this was also a good opportunity for me to pick up a lot more mana potions with how much I'm having to use Burning Hands. So I think I entered in here with like 25 mana potions or something like that, and we still almost ran out towards the end of the fight. I think I had to do 4 waves of undead, and the undead do drop gold, weapons, armor, and some pots. So it is pretty nice that they do drop stuff, so it allows you the ability to regenerate your resources throughout the fight. But this fight lasted a little over 5 minutes, but with the exception of having to physically attack the orb, we did clear this fight with only fire damage. Our next objective is to take revenge on the Thieves Guild. Here's another good example of what I mean by trying to use the environment in my favor. So the 3 boxes in the middle, if I use my character and run into them, those boxes will move. But with the NPC enemies, those act as immovable objects. So since my Burning Hands does have a little bit of range to it, I am able to use it all on the enemies, and they are not able to hit me at all. So this right here would have definitely been an extremely hard engagement if they were all able to melee attack me. The path through the Thieves Guild is mostly just littered with traps and enemies. There's really nothing dangerous other than immediate game overs, so be sure to save a lot. I must have died probably like 300 or 400 times while trying to do this challenge run. It's extremely overtuned on hard difficulty, and apparently there's an extreme difficulty. I would not be looking forward to that. But anyway, this brings us to our next boss fight, Karn. Karn has 3 different abilities that he can use throughout this fight. Depending on the distance you are away from him, he will start to throw knives, and then at 50% or so, he'll throw 2 knives. They're pretty easy to block, and blocking in this game does usually prevent all physical damage, with the exception of some super big enemies later in the game, and maybe some javelins. But also, when you are melee to him, he will start to hit you with his sword, and you can also guard that. And then after a certain amount of time, like a few seconds, he will then use like a smoke bomb and reposition himself. So one of the things that I found a little bit into the fight is if I stick myself over into a corner that's got 2 walls, kind of like a 90-degree angle, and I just sit in that corner, he will always come and physical attack me. One is the AI will always move into your line of sight if you move out of their line of sight. So by using that to my advantage, I'm able to position myself into a little corner cubby, and he will always come to me. So that also helps reduce the amount of damage that I'm going to be taking by possibly not raising my guard up in time when I'm trying to run and attack him. So by doing this method, he automatically comes to me, which is great. And additionally, by holding guard in a corner, this does allow my mana to regen, which of course is exactly what I need, because this is going to be a Burning Hands only fight again. So by doing this method, this fight took about 12.5 minutes, but I was able to do it with fire damage only. After beating him, I'd be sure to save it, recall, restock on healing, and mana potions, and then make my way through another trap infested level. And next up is Zanam, which we all know as either the Unseen Eye or the Spectator Eye. But this thing is pretty much a big staple mark in any of the Baldur's Gate series, so let's go ahead and get the fight underway. The very first attempt that I did on this guy, I pretty much got wrecked because I wasn't sure of what his mechanics were. And then the second time I fought him, I was just like, okay, well, let's redefine my strategy a little bit. And I think that I found the strategy that I wanted to do, but I just didn't have enough mana potions to do it. So on my third attempt, this dude was so easy. So let's go over the mechanics. Zanam likes to use his ball lightning, so he'll use a couple back eyeball tentacle things and create 2 ball lightnings that can go in any direction around the map, and this is pretty easy to dodge if you are at range for the boss. So you do have a lot of reaction time to move and not get hit by those, and they do quite a bit of damage if you stay in them. Next, he will combine all of his tentacles and slam the ground and cause fire beams to spread out. I believe there's 5 of them. This is also pretty easy to dodge, and they do track you. So for a majority of this fight, being in melee range is actually the easiest thing there is. Just continuously circle around the boss. He will also try and bite you, so of course that's a physical attack. Now, as long as you keep circling around the boss, he'll never hit you with that. Once he starts to get lower on health, he will use the 5 beams on you again, except they will be green and they will hit for more, and they also track you. So as long as you are melee range, you're going to be able to dodge all of these just fine. He will also use what looks like a fire shrapnel. He'll throw a whole bunch of red dots around the ground, and it doesn't really hurt too much, but if you do get hit by it, it does kind of stifle your character a little bit, which does mean that if you are in melee range and he hits you with that, with getting stifled, he can follow it up with a bite, which does a massive amount of damage. So just keep circling around the boss, and be sure to guard when he launches that firework type effect out at you. He'll also use magic missile, which auto targets you. Just be sure to block and you'll be fine. And Zanam falls in about 3 minutes. GG. Going through the portal in Zanam's room moves us over into Act 2, and I didn't know that at the time. And so you can only use your recall potions when you have discovered a safe town. And since I haven't done that in Act 2 yet, I can't actually go to town to sell or pick up more potions. So it took me about 2.5 hours to get through the initial area just to get to town with how much I kept dying. When I do finally get to town, I talk to the head dwarf, and he tells us that the dark elves have taken the mines away from the dwarves. So now it's our job to try and find the key. Now, in order for us to get the key, we need to take it from a frozen dwarf who is frozen up on top of the mountain, and he was in charge of lighting the brazier, which I believe was a call for help. I'm not really sure, I accidentally skipped the dialogue. But the purpose of lighting the brazier is to thaw the dwarf who has the key to the mines, so that is our next step. I'm definitely not proud with how long it took me to get up this mountain and discovering all the paths. I died so many times. This difficulty, again, is so overtuned, it's actually crazy. It makes me feel like the full plate or chainmail that I'm wearing might as well just be paper. So after gathering the flint and the torch, we could then light the brazier, which thaws the dwarf, and we now have the key to the mines. At this point, I now have Fireball, which is a really awesome damaging ability. It's really long range. Now the problem with it is its explosion radius. If I am in that, it does hurt myself as well, but this is a really strong ability and does more damage than Burning Hands. However, it is really hard to aim. So eventually I do put 1 point into my targeting skill tree, and that doesn't do anything. It doesn't do what I thought it would do. Maybe it's useful for like an archer, but I was expecting something to have like a red line in front of my character to show where I'm aiming it, and that just doesn't happen. So at the deepest part of the mines, I do face Ilvara twice. I did game over on the first one just because I ran out of MP potions. The amount of MP potions I needed for this fight was actually crazy. This boss teleports around a lot, and also summons adds. Now the adds aren't really too big of an issue to take care of. They do have a low HP pool, but that's still mana that I need to use on the adds instead of the boss. She does summon archers as well as melee skeletons, so it's not like I could just hang back forever and line of sight them, because they eventually will come towards me. I do a lot of running away and letting my mana regen while luring all of the adds to me, so that way I can destroy them with either fireball or burning hands. And there's a lot of areas in the back to where line of sighting is possible, and she doesn't really chase you, so you actually have to go to her in order to deal most of the damage. And a lot of the damage that I was able to do with fireball was, I guess, a little bit off screen-ish. A lot of the damage would actually hit a wall or a surface, and then the AoE would hit her. So trying to hit her directly with fireball was a really big issue, especially with her teleporting everywhere. But after 11.5 minutes, she finally falls. With the horn now in our inventory, this will allow us to break the ice wall that's preventing further progress. So we go ahead and go back to town, restock on everything, sell if we need to. I make sure that I have enough recall potions. One of the worst things to ever happen is just running out of recall potions when you really need to go back to town, so just make sure you don't run out of recall potions. There are some really big ice giants in here which can pretty much one-shot you if you get hit by one of the boulders that they throw, but with these save points they do act like a line of sight building or structure, so as long as you have aggro on them and you leash it over to the save point, you can continuously run circles. And at this point I have learned Meteor, which is a really high damaging ability for fire. It's actually my most damaging ability in terms of AoE, but it only drops the meteors around me, so it's a really small AoE. But for the purposes of running around the save point itself doesn't block the meteors still hit, so it's free damage all around. And I do this strategy a lot throughout the game with other save points and trees or bushes that are isolated, maybe a log in the third act, which you'll see soon as well. I abuse this a lot, but that doesn't mean that this is easy mode. I still get 1 to 2 shot. It's ridiculous. And this brings us to the next boss, Sxis, which is the dragon. Now this is one of the easiest fights, if not the easiest boss fight in the game for me. So because the boss isn't really moving, all I do is just launch fireballs, and yeah, I mean that's it. Just dodge the incoming ice balls and throw my own fireballs. That's it. This fight was over in about 1.5 minutes. After the boss is defeated, I learned from my previous mistake of going to the next act without refilling my potions, so I head back to town, restock, and then we are ready for Act 3, which is the final act of this game. But don't let that fool you, it's actually pretty long. With having Meteor, this is a pretty good opportunity to start AoEing farming some more, but it does come with a lot higher risk, because with the animation of Meteor itself, you have to stop moving for about a half a second before you can cast it, and this also plays a role when you are jump spamming. So by pressing the triangle and jump spamming, you do gain more distance than if you were to just regularly walk. And when you land from jumping, you cannot immediately use Meteor. You still have to wait like 3/4 of a second before you can cast it. So it is pretty detrimental against a later boss in the game that this really hurts us. Additionally, with having to wait that half a second before you can cast Meteor, you do have to be standing still to cast it. So during that half a second, mobs are still chasing you, and they're probably going to be hitting you in the back and critting you and probably just one-shotting you. So it does come with a lot more risk. About 1.5 to 2 hours in of exploring the Marsh area, this brings us to our next boss, Sxis. For this fight, I did a trial attempt to kind of figure out if I needed mana potions, if I needed health potions, and immediately when I saw how fast he was running towards me, I was just like, okay, yeah, no, this isn't gonna happen. He's gonna like 1 to 2 shot me. There's no way I could ever let this dude hit me. So my first reaction was, I remember passing one of these rooms and I wasn't quite sure if he would be able to fit through this door or not, but it turns out he is, so that's still not a problem. But with the table in here, it does have 2 chairs next to it, And I thought this room was going to be really good to be able to beat this boss, because with the bosses as well as most mobs in this game, they don't run in straight lines. They do either a right turn circle or a left turn circle to try and get at you. And in this case, with him having such a big character box and doing those circles, he's really never going to touch me. And he cannot hit me through this table, and I can't hit him either, other than with ranged attacks. I think it was my second attempt that I was just like, okay, you know what? This is going to be a burning hands fight, and it is going to take a while. So I stocked up on nothing but mana potions, and I pretty much sold half of all of my healing potions and just picked up more mana potions. With the amount of time it takes him to circle around this table, he's never going to hit me. So by staying up near the top of the table, I can use Burning Hands, but there is a 3 candlestick torch in the middle of this table that does act like a line of sight blocker. So I do have to be pretty careful about where I position my Burning Hands to where it can actually get full effect on the boss. But needless to say, this boss never hit me throughout this entire fight. For about the last 20% of his HP, I did run out of MP pots, but I did let my MP regen naturally, which still took quite a long time, but it wasn't really an issue. And this was almost a 16-minute fight, but he does go down relatively easily. With the Ivory Tower now accessible, this is going to be the last dungeon type area of the game, and there are several floors to this area. I do try and skip most of them because they do have gargoyles in them and they hurt so much. They're also extremely tanky, and they also have a tendency to swarm you. Like, it's never just one here or one there, it's like 5 to 10 at a time. I mostly try and skip everything to try and help keep my level a little bit lower, and only go after the chests and the barrels that have HP pots and MP pots, as well as additional gear upgrades or possible gear upgrades. With being in this tower, it is not possible to use recall, so everything that you find in this tower is going to be permanent from here on. So this also means that I want to equip the best gear that I can, so usually full plate or chainmail, because it does weigh a lot. So the more full plate I have, the less room I have for potions. So I believe I only have 1 or 2 pieces of full plate, and then everything else is chainmail, and then I've got like 20 HP potions and 20 MP potions. The Onyx Golem is pretty impossible to miss. He is on the floor below the boss, and so he is considered optional. He does drop the Onyx sword, which is the best sword in the game, and we go ahead and beat him and equip it, even though we're not going to be using it, because I still don't recall what the last boss does or if we're still going to need to physically attack anything. But this was part of one of the requirements just because we could kill him, so we go ahead and do it with the fireball spam. We never let him hit us because he will pretty much one-shot us, whether he stomps on us or hits us with that spear in his left hand, so just don't let him hit you. If you are melee, continuously circling around the boss and just hit him once and then circle around him, hit him once, and he'll just continuously keep chasing you in circles, then you should be able to beat him that way. With the Onyx Golem doomed, our final fight against Eldrith is now at hand. So the combat mechanics of Eldrith is pretty simple for the most part. Now, on the other hand, because they're simple doesn't mean that they're not going to do damage. She can pretty much 1 to 2 shot us at any point. So depending on the range that you are away from her, she will throw her sword at you, which can be guarded, and you can take 0 damage. So I use this to its fullest extent. So while I am a little bit further away from her, when I cast Meteor, not all of the meteors are going to hit her, but that's perfectly okay because it's still giving me more survivability by staying away from her and her throwing the sword, which I can easily block. As her HP starts to fall, she will start to cast what's like a chain lightning directly in front of her, as well as a small AoE around her. Just don't stand in front of her at all for any reason throughout this entire fight, and you should be fine. With the smaller lightning coming out of her that's not directly in front of her, it doesn't really do that much damage. You could easily cover this up with an HP potion, and this is also a pretty good opportunity to use Meteor Swarm when available. As she starts to drop to around 30 to 40% HP, she will then launch her sword up in the air and it looks like she's trying to get struck by lightning, but instead she calls down 5 or 6 different lightning blades that scattered around the area. This doesn't really do too much damage. I'm not sure if I actually got hit by one, but this is also another good opportunity to get somewhat closer and use another meteor swarm. And this fight wasn't very long at all. It was definitely one of the easier boss fights at about 3.5 minutes, and she goes down. With the victory condition obtained, can you beat Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance using only fire damage? Yes, you can. And it was pretty tough. Despite what the editing made it look like, I probably died a couple hundred times. It was pretty insane on how hard these mobs actually hit. I would definitely like to know what you all thought on this video, as this was a pretty old game to challenge run. I definitely had a lot of fun with it, so please let me know in the comments below. I strive to do challenge runs that no one else has done for a game. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Additionally, if you want to go above and beyond that, consider joining my Patreon or YouTube community via the join button next to my name below the video. Until then, I will catch you in the next challenge run. Bye bye.